We begin with the European Union, where EU foreign ministers have agreed to designate Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps a terrorist organization. The European Union also plans to impose sanctions, including asset freezes and travel bans on 21 Iranian individuals and entities, with Iran's interior minister being amongst them. Now, this move is meant to signal the EU's opposition to what is happening in the country. Iran's foreign ministry says the European Union's decision to impose the sanctions is illegal and political. The Speaker of the country's parliament says the EU designation of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terrorist organization is unfounded because it is one of the strongest and most effective counter-terrorism forces in the world. Iran has also warned that the country's armed forces are fully prepared to respond to any military harassment, emphasizing the United States and Israel. Meanwhile, the U.S. State Department says senior Iranian officials, their families, and all who profit from the Iranian government's brutal oppression of civilians are not welcome in its territory. And for this conversation from Nigeria's Federal Capital Territory, I'm joined by Global Affairs analyst Katrin Onuju. It's good to have you join us at this time.
Having me.
Now, we said the United States, the European Union rather, saying this move is a response to Iran's violent crackdown on protesters. In concrete terms, how does designating the Iran's Revolutionary Guard as a terrorist organization really change the pressure on Tehran compared to past sanctions?
It does not change anything. I think the most significant thing in this move is not Iran and the never-ending battles it has had with the West. It's actually the EU joining to support the United States in its international ambitions. And that simply tells you, despite the recent bad blood amongst the EU-American relationships, and the EU's position currently in Iran simply tells the world that the EU is jumping on the American train. And that's what we can take from here. There's nothing apart from that is new. The United States and Iran are right on where they have been as per where Israel has been with Iran. So Europe now jumping on the same wagon and saying it supports whatever the United States says is the news this time around.
I mean, there is the question about whether the European Union really has the authority to make this, designation unilaterally. We've seen Iran insisting that this decision is illegal and political. Under international law, does the EU really have an authority to do this? And what precedent does this really set?
You also need to understand the EU is at liberty to hold opinion. Okay, designating the Iranian Guards as a terrorist organization is an opinion, and such opinions are left for designer nation gatherings like the EU. They can decide what they want. That's an opinion. To some other persons, that's not true. That's Iran's army. To United States, that's all right. It simply shows the EU are back on the American template. And that's what's significant about this. Not if the never-ending crisis with Israel and United States was sustained, but EU coming on tells you, despite the bad blood over Greenland and the other issues, the United States family has the EU where they want. And I don't see any shift. I think this is good. This is a victory for Mr. Donald Trump and his international policies. The EU supporting them right on this means the EU may simply support the United States in other adventures, despite the suspected bad blood that has brewed from Europe not knowing how to engage with Mr. Donald Trump, whose actions have kind of disrupted the long-standing EU-US relations. And so we now see this as a move that puts that relation on the mend.
And despite the fact that this is an opinion, like you said. It's still important to have this discussion considering how, other nations might view Iran at this point. We've seen Iran also warning its armed forces are ready to respond to any military harassment, specifically naming the United States and Israel in this. Should this be read as, posturing or a signal of a higher risk?
It simply tells you that the standards have not changed since the establishment of the State of Israel and its job. Don't forget, Israel was established after the West defeated the Ottomans in 1914. And so, yes, you call it a country, but of course, some of us also see it as the largest U.S. military outpost. And that coming right now to support what the U.S. says in regards to its disagreements with Iran vis-a-vis Israel's disagreement with Iran, which the U.S. supports, and having the EU not jump on that same wagon to say, fine, we also support what the duo says. So the trio are back on the same page against Iran. That's what I see this as. The never-ending feud between Iran and the West is on. That's what this means.
Let's talk about how this EU moves is likely to deepen the divide between Europe and Iran. Is it likely to close the door to future dialogue, or is this likely to, pressure them to make more reforms?
The dialogues will continue. It's been like this. Relations between Iran and the West since after the Iranian Islamic Revolution has not been as good as it was between the West and Iran during the days of the Shah. So Pahlavi is removed and Ayatollah comes in, and the West changes towards Iran, and Israel has been on that same page. So I really think what we should be asking is when do we get a manageable relationship to the level that nobody starts shooting? Don't forget, in the current exchanges of brickbats, the United States have threatened to bomb Iran back to where the U.S. thinks it should be after Iran's recent recoveries from the last underground bunker bombings by the United States and Israel. So, and that's where the issue is. They've not changed. The significant thing about the current move is the EU is back with Israel and the United States in their quest to contain Iran.
And let's look at how possible that really is, considering the military strength of Iran. We've seen the United States also moving to bar senior Iranian officials and their families from entering the United States, perhaps escalating pressure in this situation. Are we likely to see a response from Iran anytime soon?
Well, it's the same normal response from Iran. It has not changed. I don't think it's going to change. What we need today is a mechanism to manage the relationship at its currently tense level. We don't expect it to change. We don't expect, unless, you see, if the Ayatollah doesn't fall, the policy will remain as it was. And as you've seen in this current round of demonstrations, despite what the West said, what Israel said, the Shah didn't fall. The Ayatollah didn't fall. And that tells you that the crisis will continue. The crisis is being inflamed by petrol that gives the Ayatollah a stay. Once he continues to stay in power, this crisis will continue. If Pahlavi kind of gets his game well and the Shah and the Ayatollah is overthrown, of course you will definitely see a change, because then the West that seeks a regime change against Iran will then have had something close to what it expects to now see a new government to work with, which we do not know. That's another thing you have to ask. If we're successful in getting the Ayatollah to leave, what comes after it? How ready is Pahlavi and the people he's been talking to? How effective are they? We're watching the streets of Iran. We're watching the demonstrations. The world is watching. I'm very disappointed. Those who expect a change in leadership and didn't see a toppling of the Ayatollah, yes, they will see a disappointment in the expectations. Then how do we now go? And that's the way. Since this current round of protests have failed to bring down the Ayatollah, what do we do? I suspect that we will have more of the same harsh and unfriendly rhetorics going back and front between Tehran and the Western capitals. I don't really see a change. It's making sure that despite the rhetorics that they exchange, that the Middle East is left at peace.
I'd like you to help us better understand what would be the possible solution to this tense relationship with Iran and the West, and now that the European Union has now involved itself in this, hoping that there is no escalation beyond what we are seeing at the moment?
Well, yeah, it depends on what you call an escalation. The presence of the Ayatollah itself is so irritating, it's even an escalation in Western calculations because they were betting so much on the current round of disruptions, but it didn't go. Don't forget, you're talking about Iran. It's an ancient nation. You're looking at the areas where you had Babylon. You're looking at the places where you had the old Mesopotamia. So this is a very, very ancient society. And the fact that the world hasn't been able to subdue Iran through the ages simply tells you it's not an easy nut to crack. And don't expect anybody to be able to overthrow them anytime soon. You're talking about Persia and very ancient people. And so we need to remember that and understand that the current crisis around that area came after the fall of the Ottomans. And so the West doesn't trust anything that could come from that area, and that's why the West is being careful. So after setting up Israel as a giant military camp, the rest is to support that camp. And Israel thinks that Iran is a threat for its existence as a new establishment by the West from 1948. So I think this is have to be seen from this perspective of the West's long-term investment to make sure that you do not have a new Constantine from that area. You don't have the Ottomans come up again, and from this time from Iran. So the Western expectation also has the thought that this is an ancient society that we're dealing with. So it's not an easy society for you to topple. They've been there since from the times of Babylon through the Middle Ages to the present day. So you have to put that in mind. Yes, containing Iran we may be able to do, but make it go away, that's not true. That's not going to happen anytime soon.
All right. I mean, some will say that the pressure that Iran has faced, especially from the West in the past years, is enough to bring down another nation which is not as strong as itself. But let's talk about this, recent EU designation, perhaps, complicating relationship with its partners, those it, engages with diplomatically, financially, and economically, countries like Russia and China.
Well, you need to understand, you call it a designation. I call it a recent EU opinion. Iran doesn't really care. And as you rightly pointed out, it's an old society. It has survived through the ages. Of course, it has allies. It has Russia. It has whoever that likes what it sees in Iran. Iran is a great weapons manufacturing center. Iran is a great civilization that incubates and also develops and progresses technologies at home. Iran has an effective drone manufacturing system embedded locally. Iran supplies weapons to some middle-level countries who need the expertise that comes from Iran. Today, the crisis in Ukraine has Iranian drones in play. And so these are ancient places that you have to understand their history to respect the fact that irrespective of today's EU opinion, and that's what I call it, a designation, yes, but just an opinion. It does not change who Iran is, neither does it change what has kept it this strong and going through the ages till now. So you would not think of it falling. Yes, you're right. If it were any middle-level country, the kind of sanctions and containment that it has come onto, it would fall. But then Iran is very different. It's an ancient society that dates back from Babylon through the Middle Ages to the present time. So whatever had made it to survive, its cave system, its history as home of the Persians, all that goes in to tell everybody that you're not dealing with just any country or any new society, you are dealing with the ancient world. And that's what Iran remains.
Wait out to see how the protests on ground, turns out to be now that Iran is responding, especially to this EU opinion, like you have mentioned. But that's a fine place to leave the conversation for now. Thank you for talking to us. Global Affairs Analyst Catherine Onunju, thank you for joining us on The World Now.